Hello, welcome to Terrace Talk. New surroundings. We're delighted to be in the Woolpack pub this evening, and we've got 3 guests. I think this is the most guests we've had on an episode of Terrace Talk, and we're all, 3 of us are probably a little bit tired after last night, but we're just about coping, and luckily it's a happy mood, a happy atmosphere here, as you may be able to sense after last night and what Norwich City achieved. Delighted to have Billy and Alfie with us again from the Revere, and also Nathan Tuck from Vital Norwich as well, to dissect that performance last night. And we're all massive fans of the FA Cup suddenly. 28 years Norwich have gone without being in the quarter-final of this competition. They're now in it. Fantastic news. Nathan, I suppose let's start with you. First and foremost, were you there last night?
Yeah, I went last night. Very long day I've had today. Got back at 1:30 this morning, got into bed about 1:30, and then had to be up at 7 to work at 8, and then come from work to here, and so here I am.
Yeah, what time did you get in, actually?
I got in at 1:15, and then I'm straight into bed.
That's not bad, actually. No, that's not bad going.
Yeah, I did fly back a little.
Not bad at all. You guys, Alfie, you went to the game, didn't you? What did you make of it? It was a special night, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think when you imagine what could have happened, it was probably like on paper the perfect scenario, but you didn't really think it was going to happen. I remember reading the Spurs team, thinking before the game I thought it was going to be a lot weaker, and even though it was a weakened side, you know, there's a lot of quality in that team, but to match a team like that for 120 minutes, Josip Juric gets his routine tap in. It was a special night, really special night.
Before we go any further, those on video probably wondering why I'm holding a phone to my face. This is no expenses spared. This is what we use for our microphone. Hopefully the audio is not too bad. Billy, you're probably the least tired of us all, I would imagine. Did you watch it? How was it for you watching at home? Because it was quite an experience inside the stadium, but was it just as nerve-wracking at home?
It was quite frustrating because even though I was watching on the iPlayer, it was 5 minutes behind, so I couldn't look at my phone. It was typical. Blame my internet connection for that, but it's always, I like watching Norwich, especially on BBC. I don't know why. It maybe wasn't as nerve-wracking because maybe I couldn't feel the tension, but when you're seeing Ben Godfrey struggling to move, then you do start to feel a little bit nervous in the 120th minute or whatever, but I was pretty confident, but the nerves were certainly there for sure.
And we were talking before we came on. The last time you guys appeared, was it after the Manchester United game?
Yeah.
So Tim Krul saved 2 penalties in that game. You're back on, and he's the penalty hero again. So I think we're gonna have to get you on more often.
But I don't know, we just have this thing where penalties just surround us, but probably not good for the heart rate or anything, but no, yeah.
You're probably right. Nathan, how do you reflect on the performance? It was gutsy, I think is the word I'd use.
Yeah, absolutely. It took us, I think, 35 minutes maybe to get our first shot on target. After that, there were a few that came in quick succession, and you only have to look at Ben Godfrey's block, with the score at 1-1, when he just came out of nowhere to come flying across and keep the ball out, to sort of know how much it meant and how much effort everybody put in.
Yeah, I actually missed that Godfrey block. Someone from the press box, someone actually had a flag up that obscured the goal, so I didn't realise how good that was until I watched the highlights back this morning. Jan Vertonghen's header, we can analyse it, we can say poor defending again, but you have to credit the response because it was a slow start from Norwich. It did look a bit sluggish, and I would imagine there was a few in the away end where you were sat, Alfie, thinking, here we go again.
I think me and Bill were talking about it briefly, pretty much straight after the game, and saying, especially after the goal, we were surprised how much of the ball Tottenham let us have. Yeah. So it was we've just conceded the goal. You kind of expecting them to kind of pile on, but it was almost from I think it's 35th minute through to the 80th. We just dominated the whole game, and you kind of sat there at one point thinking, if we don't score now. And luckily we scored 77, something like that. But yeah, I was really surprised with how we were almost allowed to kind of do what we want and just contain possession, and really that was probably why we ended up getting something out of that.
Yeah, that's a statistic, isn't there, this season? Norwich haven't got a single point from a losing position in the Premier League. So there was a few in the press box actually that were looking at each other as if to say, right, this game's sort of done and dusted. But it's a credit to Norwich that they did respond in the way that they did, that they did continue to play football, and we can talk about Spurs and the way they contained contained or perhaps opted to be a bit more defensive, but Norwich actually did try and force the issue. They did try and get the ball. They were brave, weren't they?
Yeah, I mean, if we like this game and the Leicester game, I actually don't think they're too dissimilar to like the performances we've seen in recent weeks or like prior to that. But I think we just got starting to get a little bit of luck, and like rightly so. Like we haven't had that at all this season. Like with VAR, with injuries, whatever. Maybe the tide is slightly turning a little bit, and we're just getting that little bit of luck. The goalkeeper spills it. Michel Vorm and Josip's pouncing like there's no tomorrow, it just seems to have switched a little bit in recent weeks. But no, we dominated the ball. I think the players were a little bit shocked actually at how much possession they did have, especially in that if you count the back three when Tribal dropped in between the centre backs. Like I don't think they could believe their luck at times, really, just playing at will, and we struggled to get it through the midfield. But certainly that in defence, we had a lot of possession. Yeah,
I was sat there in the second half and a bit frustrated, really, because we've seen it a lot this season with Norwich. Sort of the first third and the second third very good at moving the ball up the pitch and getting themselves into opportunities where you think right now it's about the final pass or the final delivery or the final decision, and it was just kind of halting. But then suddenly we did see a few shots from range. Lucas Rupp had one in the first half. We were actually talking in the car on the way back. I don't know what it is with the FA Cup balls, but it was Adrian, wasn't it, for Liverpool? They had a bit of a howler with the ball. Vorm had a couple last night, which Dermot capitalised on. But what can Norwich City do in the final third to be more ruthless in these games that they can take in the Premier League? Momentum is obviously the key word. I think Grant Hanley and Todd Campbell used that post-match when I spoke to them after the game. What can they do to build that momentum up and to be a bit more ruthless in the final third for you?
Well, I think the momentum is building, and we're suddenly in a position where we're winning, one back-to-back games. Admittedly, this one hasn't got us any points, it's a cup competition, but it's all good for confidence. In terms of taking chances, how can you teach that? And I think the difference has very much been that other teams we play against have been poorer than us. For example, Crystal Palace being a good example of that. They get one shot and they score at Carrow Road, and they take their chances, when they come along, and we just haven't done that, which when you consider we've got Timu Pukki is slightly surprising. He's kind of tailed off since he hurt his foot at Leicester, for sure. And Dermot, we've just not seen a lot of him. He's been injured, I know, for sort of 3 months or so, but it comes with a bit of pedigree behind him. And he's got a couple of tap-ins, so maybe that can help. And I'm sure Pukki will be returned to the starting 11 for Sheffield United.
Yeah, Dermot is an interesting one because I thought his cameo against Leicester was very impressive in terms of came on, held the ball up, knocked things on, did everything he needed to do. Last night perhaps was a bit more frustrating, didn't have as much of the ball. Perhaps did have to feed off scraps a little bit, but did get that goal that I think he probably deserved in the end.
Yeah, definitely. A mate texted me sort of during the game in the first half and just said, Dermot looks really ordinary. And I didn't text him or have any other text with him until we'd scored, and he was watching on the iPlayer, and I just texted him, ordinary, eh? It's a tap-in, but he was there to make it happen, so that's the main thing.
Yeah. Dermot, so I think it's almost a little bit hard to judge him. Like, this is players come in very low on confidence, a few injury problems. I don't really want to judge him too much until he's had like 2 or 3 games. If he'll get that, I don't know. But I think there's certainly signs of a good player there. His link-up plays really well. Sometimes you can just see that rustiness, that lack of confidence. But all 3 goals he scored have come from kind of persistence, if you like. So I think that desire is certainly there, and the goals will come.
Yeah, I've seen a few people say that his goals, particularly in this competition, have been quite ugly. But actually, if you think about the Burnley one and the one last night, he had to sort of anticipate it, didn't he? He had to follow in because, okay, it's a striker's job to perhaps ask the questions, why not? What if this happens? What if this? And respond to perhaps shots and things that happen in the game. But not every striker does it. And it wasn't the best of finishes. He got a bit of luck with it, but to actually follow it in, it's quite a rare trait in a striker, I suppose. Could he be quite big, Alfie, for Norwich in the second half of the season, given that Pukki is perhaps a little bit out of form at the moment? He's played a lot of football this season, to be fair to him. Is Dermot an option, if only from the bench, to impact games for you?
I think it's one of those things, again, it's tough to tell without really giving him like the minutes he needs in the Premier League. I think he offers a different option up front, even in a way that I remember one specific moment in the second half where he nodded the ball down, lovely to Rupp on the edge of the box, went straight to the keeper. But the point is, sometimes even with Puka, like, his build-up play is fantastic, but they are kind of two different types of players. So I think it offers us a different dimension potentially. Maybe if we want to play that longer ball into like a target man. But I really think without seeing him in there for like a full 90 minutes, you never really know if he's going to make that impact. It's good to see that he's making impact like in the cup competitions, but in the Premier League, it's a whole different ball game.
Agreed. Before we go on to penalties, I want to speak a little bit about the midfield, because there's been a lot of people calling for Mario Vrancic to play. Last night he did play. What did you make of his performance? Because I actually felt when Kenny McLean and Alex Tettey came on, Norwich did look more solid. Do you just put that down to match fitness, or do you think it's a quality thing?
Mario has a lot of quality about him, we know that, but he just looked rusty last night. He looked like a man who hasn't played a lot of football, and then when Kenny and Alex Tettey are together, you kind of, here's a couple of guys that have played together regularly, know each other, they're match fit, they're sharp, and Mario just looked a little off the pace, I would say, when he was on the pitch.
Do you think Kenny McLean's underrated?
Definitely. On my forum, there's a few people that just don't rate him at all, and think he's rubbish. But I look at what he does, and he flies into tackles, he wins headers. He's got a lovely left foot. He can pass the ball, range, distance. He can make a long ball pass. I do think he's definitely underrated. Definitely.
Yeah, it was a lovely pass from him last night. I'm thinking from memory now. Cross field to Max Aarons, who's I think was flagged offside actually. Dermot missed the chance. I think from the replay it would have been very tight. Certainly would have been a line drawer on VAR, but it was a lovely pass. It shows his ability. What are your thoughts on that midfield too? Do you think last night showed that actually Daniel Farke's patience in McLean and Tettey is justified?
Yeah, I mean, I've kind of mixed feelings about this personally, because it's hard to judge because Vrancic and Tribal done so well last season. They haven't really had the minutes this season. I think individually, Kenny McLean and Alex Tettey, you can't fault them. I do question if a side can ever survive in the Premier League with Kenny McLean and Alex Tettey in midfield. Like, that's just honestly, like, if Vrancic and Tribal is any better, I'm not sure, but yeah, I think it's a little bit regressive, but their work rate and desire, that no one can fault that. But do they have that technical quality in a Norwich side built around possession? I'm not too sure.
I think if I was Daniel Farke, I would argue, look, I've tried to play a technical midfielder next to an Alex Tettey, next to a Kenny McLean, next to a Tom Tribal, and Norwich have been beaten and beaten quite heavily. So I think for him, I'd say, look, we've been more solid with these two. This is why I've made this decision. It's not because I don't rate those players, but it's just to keep Norwich in the game. And you have to say, recently, Wolves aside, Manchester United aside, they have kept themselves in games better.
They have. My counter argument to that would be that, like, all right, now we're seeing Lewis come back in the side, but I can understand. But then fullbacks were so important to the way we played, and this is going back a few weeks now, but you're then being even more defensive by playing Byram, so that's where for me we struggled previously. But I think Tettey and McLean certainly have grown into the season, and you could see that they were match fit, weren't they? They were ready to play last night, and that was really important, bringing those two on actually in the middle of the park, because I think there would have been some cramp in Vrancic and Tribal's legs for sure.
Yeah, I agree. Alfie, what's your thoughts on the midfield situation?
I think it's like two polar opposites. You've got a very industrial midfield, which again it depends really on what positions you're playing. Like if we're at, I think it was quite refreshing to see two midfielders that could distribute the ball last night. I think that's the only criticism, is that let's be honest, as good as Alex Tettey can be in his defensive game, he almost he has to give the ball away to get it back again. Whereas with Tribal sitting in more in that kind of three at the back, and distributing out that way. And even Vrancic, while he was on the pitch, obviously he picked up that yellow, which is kind of I reckon why he came off a bit earlier. It was refreshing to see them be able to distribute the balls out, or maybe those kind of killer passes which you'd never expect Kenny or Tettey to kind of do normally. But I say that, but then you look at games like Leicester, and without those two in kind of midfield, it could have been a different story. So it's again, it comes down to that kind of, they haven't really had the time or the chances this season. But at the same time, there's obviously a reason for that behind closed doors that we're not seeing.
We're about 15 minutes in. We've not mentioned Tim Krul yet. We'll come on to him in a moment. I just want to wrap up this midfield debate with Alex Tettey because, and I'll be honest here, when I see a Norwich City side and I see the team announced and Alex Tettey's not in it, I do fear a little bit that Norwich are going to be a little bit soft. Is it a fault of the club perhaps? And again, this is maybe a broader point about recruitment, or could be a compliment to Alex Tettey that they failed to really replace him, and they are so dependent on him. Do you think?
I think you've got to look at it as a compliment to Alex Tettey because the guy's been here since 2012, and all right, he may not be the most cultured guy on the ball, shall we say, but he's a midfield enforcer. He wins the ball, he gives the ball to someone who can play, and numerous people have come in over those 8 years who've tried to displace him, Ibrahim Amadou being the latest, and just not been up to it, and he's there at 33, 34, and he's still keeping these guys out of the team. I guess to me it looks like the new signing Melvin City looks like he is potentially thought of as the successor in waiting, if you like, and he's going to have at least a year, I think, with Alex Tettey to kind of see how he plays and learn stuff from him to hopefully help him improve. But I think age is probably just going to beat Alex in the end, rather than another player.
Yeah, he seems to be getting better with age as well. There was certainly, I was speaking to John Ruddy recently. He said the last time he spoke to Alex Tettey gave off the impression that he was going to retire. So that goes to sum it up. Right, let's talk penalties then, because it did decide the game last night, and it was actually my first penalty shootout that I've seen live. But Norwich's first win in a penalty shootout since 2009 when they beat Swindon Town in the Johnson Paints Trophy all those years ago. How nervous were you for those penalties?
Fairly nervous, but being a little bit older than you guys, I have seen one or two of these in the past, and I was thinking back today to a time when I saw Norwich beat Bolton at Carrow Road. I don't know when, but Jan Molby scored for us, so that was some time ago. But I just thought with Tim, we always had a chance. You've always got a chance with such an absolute penalty killer. He will. I just back him to save one or two in a shootout, and that's exactly what he did. Plus his tactics, the way he behaves towards the other players is awesome. The way he clearly targeted Troy Parrott, and he was the only, and the referee,
ruthless, wasn't it?
Absolutely, and the referee did, for whatever reason, didn't sort of seem to be aware of what was going on, whether he was checking his phone or something, I don't know. But he intercepted him on the edge of the area. I was watching him, and he was whispering to him and talking to him. And then if you look at the replay, obviously I couldn't see it in real time, but if you look at the replay this morning, and he looks terrified. Troy Parrott looked absolutely, terrified with that huge stand behind him, all those Spurs fans in front of him, and you can imagine Tim saying something like, no pressure here, son. Not on me anyway, it's all on you. They expect you to score, that kind of thing. Yeah, and maybe a few choice words for him, I don't know.
I would imagine there was a fair few choice words. I spoke to him after, and he was talking on that point about how he essentially said to Troy Parrott, when I've done my homework, I haven't actually seen many penalties you've taken. So essentially go and impress me, go and do something. But he did match him. I think you're right. He did get the better of him psychologically. Yeah. Tim Krul, that water bottle that night. How good a performance was that from a Norwich City player? How influential was it from Tim Krul?
Yeah, like the 90 minutes, well, the 120 minutes, I guess, and the penalties included. I think it's almost become more, certainly now when a forward faces Krul in a penalty, like it's almost become more of a mental negative for them. Like it's not even necessarily about Tim Krul's technical attributes. It's almost the reputation he now holds, and no striker wants to face Krul in a penalty. I think they'd almost rather not, so I think it's more getting in the players' minds, and I mean that before he takes the penalty, and actually the prospect of facing Krul, because everybody's seen it on last night and in the World Cup and over this season, just how good he is.
Yeah, he made a lot of good saves in the 120 minutes as well for Norwich. For as much as we talk about Norwich, and Daniel Farke's referred to Norwich as being a little bit soft, he's one player who does have a bit of a nasty edge about him, doesn't he? And we saw that with Troy Parrott. He's a lovely guy off the pitch as well, actually, which makes that quite a humorous point, I suppose. But those saves, but particularly the one from Parrott that we're talking about, and again, a lot of it comes down to homework. But in terms of a technical perspective, it was as good a penalty shootout as a goalkeeper could have.
I think, for a start, I'd always say I've never been as wrong about a player as I have about Tim Krul. Bill will know how negative I was at the start of the season about everything to do with him.
Why was that?
Start of last season.
Start of this season when Farman come in.
Oh yes.
Even though he did well, I think there was always that thing last season of, God, should have saved that, should have done this, and I think it was purely because he wasn't as good at home as what he was away. And I was kind of ready for him this year to be replaced, and that didn't really fuss me. But I've never been so wrong. This year, hands down for me, player of the season for me.
It's also worth noting though, that's because of Farman's FIFA rating more than anything.
More than likely. Yeah.
Well, Daniel Farker does say he shouldn't listen to those, doesn't he? And I suppose that brings us on nicely to the point of Tim Krul and his season, because as you said there, Ralph Fearman came in. Everyone perhaps expected him, this Champions League goalkeeper from Schalke, to really perhaps overtake Tim Krul and to be Norwich's number one. And Krul's performances have kept him out of the side, haven't they? And as Alfie says there, player of the season, I think there's a lot of people coming to the conclusion that actually he could be Norwich's player of the season. But obviously Fearman's about to leave to Norway, so it goes to show how good he's been this season. Player of the season for you, Tim Krul, after that performance?
Without doubt. And I've been championing him for a while on the website of saying how well he consistently does. And all right, he's having a lot of action. Well, that's not his fault, but he's facing a lot of shots. But he's done brilliantly. Last night was maybe a real kind of underlining of how well he's done. And Ralph Fearman was brought in to give him competition. He's risen to that, responded to that, to a point where Ralph is so cheesed off he's decided he needs to leave to try and not make this season a complete write-off for him. And although he's cost us a lot of money, could it still be seen as a success that Ralph Fearman has pushed him to a point where Tim has reached this level of performance he was achieving at Newcastle before he had his ACL injury?
He feels like, to me, he's back on the top of his game, back to the goalkeeper who's getting linked with Manchester United all those years ago. And when you consider the major injury he had, the fact he went out on loan to Alkmaar and Ajax again, couldn't get a game, comes back to Norwich with, well, he was a name, wasn't he? But certainly pedigree, who'd lost his way, I suppose fits the bill in that regard. This season he just seems to have really kicked on, to have really sort of found his level, I suppose, and Norwich rely on him so heavily now. The amount of, I spoke to Hanley, Campbell and Krul last night, but both of them said how confident they felt going into the shootout with him in goal, and the fact that the team has that confidence in him. We've seen when he was injured with McGovern and Fearman as well, only for that little cameo against Crystal Palace, that perhaps the trust wasn't there as much, and there was a bit more doubt in that back five, and particularly given how young they are. He's a massive influence, isn't he?
It wasn't just his shot stopping last night, because he must have made 4 or 5 good saves in the actual game. Just his ball handling, the way that he was taking balls out of the air and just performing at a high level must inspire those in front of him. That back four must be inspired by that and feel confident that he's not gonna drop a clanger.
Yeah, I get the impression he's wrote his name into Norwich City folklore after that performance last night. Let's speak about the FA Cup more broadly then. Quarter final, Carrow Road. That gets the mouth watering, doesn't it?
Yeah, we're saying kind of, obviously we've never experienced anything like this, to do the FA Cup, but no, I'm not sure who we would want. We were talking about this before, do we want the easier prospect? Because it almost makes you... Does that make you more nervous? I'm not sure, but...
I think I look back to games like Luton at home.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, yeah.
I always feel like we would match United, whereas with Derby we'd almost go into sweet, Wembley, here we come. But then at the same time, when you see Bruno Fernandes, and I'm sure we'll see tonight, that will probably make our mind up. We know what United have done. I made the trip to United away this year. Wasn't particularly nice, I'll admit.
That's an understatement. Yeah.
So part of me is you always want to get the on paper easier game, but part of me is come on, bring on United, let's have them as well.
Yeah, on both occasions against Manchester United, and I think for the majority of the big teams, you can sort of put an argument to say that Norwich have been pretty decent, but Man United is one where they haven't performed in either game really. I'm gonna ask you all a question now. Where does last night rank on your Norwich City supporting spectrum, on your Norwich City supporting list? How high up? What do you rank above it, I suppose? Because it was such a special night. The drama of it was an excellent game of football, more than anything else. But for it to have the end like that, I mean, it couldn't have been written by Shakespeare, really. The way it transpired, with McLean missing first, and Norwich going on to win with Ida and Campbell, who we haven't mentioned. Excellent penalties from two young players. Nathan, we'll start with you. Where does that rank for you in terms of your Norwich City supporting life?
I mean, obviously, I've seen us beat Bayern Munich, and which takes a little bit of beating. I also went to the playoff final, which was terrific as well. You know, in terms of away performances, though, away days, you know, in the manner of it and the penalties and all of that. Just that does put it quite a special memory, and I think that's probably the best way to think of it. If you go to away games, these things are always memories for you, whether they're home games can kind of blend into one. You're always in the same surroundings, you always see the same stand, quite often the same people and that kind of thing. But if you go away, it's all this different experience, and so I think that it's just another great memory. It's up there, it's a very good night, but I do think probably Bayern Munich.
Probably just about edges it. Yeah, we'll give you that one. What about for you guys? If we're ranking it as an away day, then it was obviously the biggest following since Wembley. For you, right up there in your Norwich City supporting memories?
Definitely.
Perhaps beyond Wembley.
I think...
and beaten Bayern Munich.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I can't... I don't. All I really have... being an 18-year-old, in terms of from my Norwich history, is really the playoff final, which was a fantastic day. But that was it's not like a normal away day. The problem is, for me, most of the away games I go to, we get battered. So in terms of how special it was, the fact that there's 9,000 of us there at a new stadium, a Jose Mourinho side as well, even if he's lost his spark, it's still, you know, I think it's definitely up there. Whether it's probably not at the top for me, but in terms of as far as FA Cup memories go, it's obviously the top. But yeah, that's for me.
I'm probably the anomaly here. I don't know. I don't really gauge like these big moments as like the best memories. I always like think of like things beyond football, if that makes sense. Because like if I followed Norwich to watch their side win games, I wouldn't follow Norwich almost. So, so maybe but you know, that's not why I follow football. It's not to win, or it's everything else. So I can't say it's up there, especially kind of sat in bed with my girlfriend, like just watching it on the TV. It's not really, for you two, like I guess if you're witnessing it,
yeah, that's fair enough. I think. For me, it was, and again, we talk about away support, and you mentioned there hasn't been too many successful days this season, probably only Everton really that we reflect upon positively. But you think for all those miles on the motorways and all the disappointment, that was worth it last night, wasn't it, for that eruption of noise. We're going to come on to a little bit of Sheffield United as well as the FA Cup draw, who you'd want in the next round. Derby, Manchester United, you'll probably all know by the time you've seen this who Norwich City will face, but they kick off later this evening. That's going to be a massive game for all involved. Nathan, let's start with you then. Like I say, everyone will probably know by the time we've watched this, but Derby or Manchester United, because it's Manchester United, again, you get everything that comes with it, but Derby County would be such a great opportunity for Norwich to reach an FA Cup semi-final. So how do you view it? Who would you want?
I think you're exactly right there. Derby on paper makes you think, oh yeah, that's winnable. And Man United, the way we performed against them, both games this season, it's been quite shocking really how bad we've been compared to when we played other, you know, the top level clubs. I'm happy we're at home. I think that's the main thing.
It's going to be a hell of an occasion, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And if it's Man United, then you know that's probably going to get picked for TV. But you know that's going to be a very good looking tie, I would have thought, for the TV companies. And Derby's is this opportunity that we'd probably all see it as, but. You know, Derby have got to do the business against United first, haven't they?
Yeah, and hopefully if they do come to Carrow, they don't turn the floodlights out this time. So that's hopeful. What about you guys? You sort of touched upon it earlier, but United, Derby?
I think I'll probably say Derby, just because I don't think there's a side that probably exposes our flaws as much as United. If you think about the performance, like we leave so much space.
Counter-attacks.
Yeah, like there's not a better counter-attacking side in England than United, and I think just for that the prospect of like Bruno Fernandes, Fred, and passes through to like Martial and Rashford behind our defence kind of terrifies me a little bit now thinking about it. So I'd say Derby.
They would be Rashford-less though, so because obviously he's injured, isn't he? So does that change it?
I think as much as I want to say United, I think you got to be honest and say Derby is probably who you'll be banking for. But at the end of the day, Derby going to be sitting there like, oh great, Norwich, bottom of the Premier League. They beat us, last time 4-3 in that dramatic game. Wayne Rooney in the team. They're not particularly like a special side in terms of like talent wise, but they're going to be well up for it as well. So I don't think either's going to be an easy game. It's just a case of we have been really bad against Man United this year. So I would hope for Derby, but I think if we got United, Carrow Roads, maybe under the lights, I think we can still beat United anyway.
Yeah, if you can't get yourself up for that game, what can you get yourself up for, I think? And you do have to beat the good sides to progress in any cup competition. We've got this far. We have, obviously, after last night, haven't spoken about Leicester. Let's look ahead to Sheffield United a little bit then. Different competitions, admittedly, but 2 wins on the spin. It's going to be a very difficult game going to Bramall Lane, particularly after the workload of last night. How do you see it? Because Norwich go in there with a little bit of momentum for a change, a little bit of a winning feeling, a little bit of positivity around the group and the club.
Yeah, absolutely. And Sheffield United done fantastically well, so much better than I thought they would do. I honestly didn't think the overlapping centre-backs thing would work in the Premier League, but
it's a revolution.
It just shows what I know, because it's been brilliant. And he hasn't changed a thing. Chris Wilder is still playing the same way. But when they came to Carrow Road, certainly in the first half, we played them off the park, but just couldn't get the second goal. And then we fold under a couple of, sort of typical defensive frailties for us, and suddenly we lose the game. And it's a winnable game, but they are a very difficult side, and they're not where they are by accident, is the best way to describe that.
No, they're not. I'm interested because I think a lot of Norwich fans will be looking up at Sheffield United, probably a little bit envious actually about how they've approached this season. I've seen a few fans talk about terminology of the different managers. Chris Wilder, I remember an interview after Dean Henderson made that mistake against Liverpool. They lost 1-0 earlier on in the season, and he came out and essentially said, look, I've got nothing to be proud about, we lost the game. Pretty ruthless actually in terms of his approach, and I've seen a few people compare that to Daniel Farke and say actually he's probably overplayed the fact this is a miracle and overappreciated the fact Norwich are in the Premier League. How do you view that? Do you read too much into it?
I guess it's about the personalities of the player. Like when I think about the Buendia comments, it wasn't too dissimilar really in terms of like the aggressive kind of nature of it. But like, I guess it would have been a miracle it still could be a miracle. Yeah. It'll be even bigger miracle now. But no, I don't. I think if Chris Wilder's your manager, you love him. But I certainly would at this moment in time. I don't think I'm happy with that for sure.
Yeah, I think you're right there. Chris Wilder's one of those managers which you hate him if he's against you in the opposition dugout, but you almost kind of want him to be your manager. Like what he means to those fans, especially with what he's done with them. I think he is definitely. I look at him, and it might even just be like a British factor, that kind of old school like mentality, a bit more ruthless in that way. I don't think Farke's one to kind of make a scene in the media, whereas I feel like Wilder almost not wants to, but he's quite open. Like, he's one of the best managers to ever watch an interview with, because he'll tell you exactly what he's feeling. But yeah, I think again with Farke, like, it's a completely different type of manager, completely different dressing room, so it's hard to really like compare them in that way.
I think it was a big week for Farke as well, like in terms of gaining the, not trust, but maybe trust is the right word, from the players and the fans. I heard him say that he told the players, you're going to win this shootout, and if that goes wrong, like he wouldn't come out in the media and say if we lost, but if that goes wrong, then the players are probably almost doubting him a minute. I think that reaffirms that belief in him. Obviously the Buendia comments kind of, I guess, proved right as well. But I think it was a big week for Farke, because I don't think we've seen him under that scrutiny, certainly a few weeks ago.
Yeah, I have to say, and I was quite critical at half-time of the formation change that we saw last night, but I think you have to say, really, over the last two games, Daniel Farke has called it absolutely spot on in terms of his comments. Just back to Chris Wilder, we seem to have come a bit further along, I would say, since the finger tapping on the desk and the moaning about buses being late. Have you got a newfound appreciation for Chris Wilder this season? Because he seems to have sort of won a few Norwich City fans over compared to what we saw in the Championship.
Yeah, definitely. That whole thing a couple of years ago of bus being late was all funny at the time, but then of course they beat us in the corresponding fixture at Carrow Road, and then they beat us again last season, and we only got a draw against them at Carrow Road, and they've beaten us again this season. They've had the upper hand, really, but you can't knock it. As he has, but he's a local lad, and he wants to win. He's got a real will to win, and that's what's getting them to where they are.
Yeah, I saw their club put out a statement earlier on this week, actually, advising fans to get there a little bit earlier because the Sheffield University's having an open day. So I don't know if that was a little bit of a dig or not, but we'll see. Okay, finally then, guys, how do you see the rest of the season? Because we've got a massive occasion on the horizon now with the FA Cup quarter-final, and that is going to be an occasion and a game that people aren't going to be able to take their eyes off, and they're going to be looking towards. But the reality is Norwich is still in a dogfight. I worked out earlier this week that if they win all their remaining home games and one away game, considering they've got Watford away, that would put them on 39 points. Probably just about enough to survive. So it's still there. Maybe we're grasping at straws a little bit, but how do you view this final 10 games? How big are they?
Well, I mean, let's be honest. In terms of how big they are, I mean, obviously they're massive. The tricky thing is when you look at where we haven't gotten points in our home games, it's from these types of games that are coming up. I think I sat there and we were talking after the Leicester game. We were saying Everton, Southampton, Brighton, West Ham, all easy wins. But you forget, we've been beaten 5-1 by Villa at home, and Sheffield. I mean, those types of teams where they're perceived to be maybe a little bit weaker than us, we've actually underperformed. I think the odds are massively stacked against us. At this point here, I just think it's all about building that momentum. We go into this, if we even get a point or a win against Sheffield, that's humongous. The tricky thing is when you win like against Leicester, and then the game's played tomorrow, they all win anyway, and it's like the first time in however many years all three teams in the bottom in the relegation zone then go and win. But yeah, all you can do is just really hope at this point.
Yeah, I think the reality is that Norwich aren't bottom of the league because Watford beat Liverpool 3-0. They're bottom of the league because, as you alluded to there, they haven't beaten the teams around them. And they have probably got a fairly favourable run in terms of the teams they have to face. It's just about whether they back themselves into a tight corner, I suppose, and whether or not they can get out of it. But this is going to be a really difficult game against a side who are very strong at home. The fans are going to be up for it, considering it's quite a competitive rivalry, I'd say, between the clubs. Perhaps it's dulled down a little bit, but it's going to be a really difficult game. And Norwich still, and we can talk about 2 back-to-back wins, they still haven't managed that in the league. If they could get a result here, even a point, to just continue that momentum, that would be massive, wouldn't it? Going into 2 home games, one of which being an FA Cup quarter-final.
Yeah, I've said this before to Alf, we haven't really seen what this side is capable of with a bit of momentum. Last season we saw it a lot, but this season we haven't really seen how they can perform, and I think the side's a different team with a bit of confidence. So yeah, a good performance on the weekend, and things might be looking a little bit up for once this season.
Goodness me, positivity. Do you share the positivity? Is it still looking fairly unlikely for you?
I consider myself a realist, and it's going to be hard. It's going to be a really tough thing to do. Described by Farker as the little miracle, it would be a big miracle, I think, if we were to stay up. But the thing about it, I read a great quote, someone put it on a tweet, I don't know who to credit it for, but they say that it's hope that kills you, but at least we're still alive. So, we can still... You just got to keep taking each game as it comes, and you never know. Leicester showed a few years ago that this sort of thing is possible. Who knows? I mean, they've got momentum at the right time. It's not like they're just on this tailspin losing streak. The cup run can only help, I would have thought, to give a bit more positivity into it, and we'll see where it takes us.
The thing is, they beat Sheffield United, and we're all talking about it being on, aren't we? So it's a funny season considering where we were after Wolves as well, and where everyone was pretty resigned to the fact that they were going down. All right, then let's finish this off. Then Bramall Lane on Saturday. We're all feeling fairly optimistic at the moment, but let's hear your score predictions. I'll just go round the table.
I'm going to say 1-1. Realistically, 1-1. I'll be happy.
I was going to say 1-1, but I'll say 2-2 now. Just,
Okay.
Yeah.
Just to be different.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's exactly. I was going to go 1-1, and then I was thought, well, I'll go 2-2. So I'll try and be positive then. Let's go a 2-1 away win.
That would be a great effort.
That'll be your away win.
It would be, yeah, exactly. Right then, guys, let's finish off. Where can people find you if they want to find you and hear all about your band?
Twitter, Instagram, Facebook is at the Revere Band. On Spotify as well. Also got a tour coming up in April, 3-day tour across Bury, St Edmunds, Ipswich. Not sure if the Norwich shirt's going to come out for that one yet, and Norwich as well. So some exciting stuff coming up as well. So yeah, look forward to it.
Wishing you the best of luck, guys. Thanks for coming on. We'll shake hands. Well, that's fine. We'll end formally. Nathan, what about you? There you go. Lovely.
Yeah.
Where can people find you?
The easiest thing is to Google Vital Norwich, and that will get you on board.
Perfect. Nice. No tours or anything like that.
No, not yet. No. Well, maybe I should. Yeah.
Maybe on the back of this.
Yeah, maybe on the back of this.
Exactly. Right. I'm going to go home and get some sleep. I think, as we all are. Thank you very much for watching. Make sure if you watched on YouTube to leave a like and subscribe to the channel as well. If you listen to this as a podcast, leave a review. I think that's all the admin done. Guys, thank you very much. Thanks very much for watching. Onwards to Bramall Lane.